in the Ministry of Economic Affairs and Investment to move the passing of a resolution to grant the sum of $103,533,000 from the Consolidated Fund, $533,192 from the Consolidated Fund, and to place it at the disposal of the government to supplement the estimates 2021 to 2022 as shown in the supplementary estimates number 2, 2021 to 2022, which form the schedule to the resolution. Head 34, Ministry of Finance, Economic Affairs and Investment, in the amount of $50 million.
Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this head and this particular supplementary is extremely significant. Now, there's quite a bit of background here, and as a matter of fact, the recapitalization of the unemployment benefit account of the National Insurance Scheme is one of the most significant things that we can do, not just because of the importance of the scheme, not just because of the importance of this unemployment benefit account and what it has meant to the people of Barbados, but also because of the signal that it sends to the international community that Barbados is handling its fiscal affairs and Barbados is simultaneously looking after its people. Now, Madam Chair, just to give a little bit of background, and I know that the Honourable Member for St. Peter, when he speaks, will give much more context to this. The Unemployment Benefit Account and the National Insurance Fund are two of the 6 funds that are managed by the National Insurance Scheme. Now, we happen to be following an era, if it can be called that, a decade during which the National Insurance Scheme, having established itself as one of the most enviable mechanisms set up anywhere in the world to protect workers and to protect the rights and the economic future of people, having established itself as such, was then called on in the decade preceding this administration to, I could only say, to take the place of good financial decision making. And so the National Insurance Scheme became particularly exposed during the last administration. It became one of the biggest holders of government debt. And as such, when in 2018 we had to undergo a debt restructuring to return this country to good financial health, it meant that, in particular, the unemployment account, benefit account, stood at a disadvantage because of that restructuring. It suffered a 37.5% reduction in its government securities, and we knew that we would have to take some steps to put that back in good order. Now, the National Insurance Scheme, and I want to give some perspective here. It is a fully funded scheme, and the history will show you that having gone through a process of pension reform in 2003 and having been able to shore up its assets, the scheme has always been one that has performed well and has remained reliable for the citizens of Barbados. So we had the debt restructuring in 2018, and that caused some loss in value. But more immediately and more recently, this country and the world went through and continues to go through the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, Barbados was and continues to be at an advantage in response to the pandemic, not just because of certain health decisions that we took, not just because we took the decision to set up the Harrison's Point facility and to isolate the main healthcare system, the QEH and the polyclinics, from the treatment of the health response to the pandemic, which turned out to be one of the best decisions that we could have made. So not only were we in a good position because of that, not only were we in a good position because we had taken the necessary steps to bring the country back into good financial health so that we could get our reserves back up to where they sit today at around 2.6 billion, the highest they have ever been. Had we not done that, imagine what COVID would have done to this country. So not only those things, but we had and have a national insurance scheme, a social security scheme that provides benefits to people that many countries wish they had established when they did and wish that they were able to offer to their citizens. That national insurance scheme was not able to only provide the regular benefits through the unemployment benefit account that it would normally provide, but we also had to take certain decisions. And COVID for us has been the great teacher. It has shown us the gaps in many cases in the mechanisms that are needed to respond to people. But the truth is that no country, no social security system, no social protection system, no education system anywhere could have been prepared for the pandemic. But as education systems go, as social protection systems go, as social security systems go, those in Barbados are among and have been among the best prepared and the best positioned to respond to the pandemic. We didn't get it perfect. No one has. But we were able, not just to be able to deliver the benefits that the scheme was set up to do, and I'll come in a minute to the numbers that we could never have anticipated, but also to provide new benefits. Because what we saw was that those who were self-employed would have been and were at a disadvantage. And we were able to use the scheme, and through the scheme, to set up things like the self-employment benefit that people would not ordinarily have had access to, but we needed to respond to people who, own cosmetology salons, own hairdressing salons, own shops, and so on, that had to come to a standstill, but that ordinarily there would not have been provision for them. And we created a fund that would have been able, over a 3-month period, and then further extended, to provide a benefit to those people. But COVID caused a complete standstill in the private sector. I want to emphasize that the public sector and public sector employment remained constant. And we, in fact, had as a government to step in where the private sector could not respond. But in 2020, we saw 52,282 claims received from approximately 38,000 individuals. Now, the regular annual average of claims is just over 11,000. We saw during COVID over 52,000 claims received from 38,000 people. Now, when the National Insurance Scheme was created, nobody could have expected that kind of scale, that kind of demand on the system. And the result was that the unemployment benefit account had to, and did. There was no question about whether we should do it. Used all of its reserve to pay those unemployment claims, and also borrowed from the National Insurance and from the catastrophe funds to satisfy its statutory obligation and pay all approved unemployment claims. We had a duty to take care of people first. And then, as we knew we could, to settle the issue of making sure we could recapitalize the fund. And so, Madam Chair, we are here today to do just that. Now, I think that Barbadians understand and see that the National Insurance Scheme is perhaps iconic for us and really represents something that is about the rights of workers and understanding that sometimes you have to catch people. We talk about social safety nets, and that is exactly what it's for. To realize, and this is something that I feel compelled to remind ourselves of all the time. Poverty or deprivation is not a state. It's not a state of being. It's not like being black. It's not like being a woman or a man. It is something that can happen to any one of us. Any one of us can suffer an event, can suffer a shock, can have something happen to us, lose a job, have to take care of high medical bills, have on behalf of a friend or a family member, and then find that we need help. And I am at pains to remind those around me that we must not treat poor people, quote unquote, as if it could not happen to any one of us. Any one of us could need that net, and that's why this was created. And while the National Insurance Scheme has served Barbados well, and it's not to say that there aren't things that must be and should be restructured and re-engineered to serve Barbadians better. But it also has to take another step to serve Barbadians in another way, which is to be able to be used as a vehicle for local investment, for those same people on whose behalf contributions are being paid, to be able to use the capital to help create an investment vehicle for regular people to have a piece of the action. And there is scope, there is space, and in many ways there is perhaps a duty for us to be able to use the resources of the National Insurance Scheme, not to prop up the government as the last administration did, but to give opportunities to people. Now, we are this week in IMF discussions. We've just started an IMF mission. And I was just checking just before I rose the gross international reserves position of the country, wherein we should be seeing the special drawing rights, SDRs, that are allocated to each country by the IMF. We should be, if we have not already received, should soon be seeing those SDRs in the amount of $129 million US. Now, we've done the work and we've demonstrated the fiscal responsibility such that there is confidence in the international community that Barbados knows how to spend its money responsibly on behalf of its citizens. That is not something the last administration could have said. And so it's not a question of having the liquidity. It is a question of having the fiscal space, which is another conversation. It is not a question of having the liquidity. It's a question of using those resources for the right reasons. And this 50 million recapitalization of the unemployment benefit account is such a reason to take care of Barbadians when they need it most. So, Madam Chair, I therefore move that head 34 in the amount of $50 million stand part.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Peter.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I rise to add my support to this resolution before this Honourable Chamber to recapitalize the Unemployment Benefit Fund, which is part of the suite of funds administered by the National Insurance Office, the National Insurance Department. The Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central has aptly contextualized the situation that causes us to have to bring this supplementary to this Honourable Chamber. Ordinarily, this would not need to be the case because what the scheme takes in, it pays out from those inflows. And as the Honourable Member indicated, ordinarily 11,000 odd claims per year. I'll repeat that we are in a pandemic only because sometimes one may get the feeling that there are one or two persons out there who, while I think in their brains recognizing that there is a pandemic, and a pandemic like none of us has seen, there is still sometimes the view that the impact is not as significant as is made out to be. But I think comparing 11,000 to 52,000 gives, or puts in pretty sharp relief, the impact of the pandemic on Barbados. And because it is a pandemic, the impact, particularly these very negative impacts, are not limited to Barbados. And so it is not a matter of this level of claims because of something specific happening in the country. All countries around the globe have been impacted negatively and in very significant ways. Even those countries that have been able to, in some respects, insulate themselves have still suffered contractions in their economic activity. But small island developing states, particularly those that rely on travel and tourism, have been significantly impacted. And for obvious reasons. A virus impact on travel, then visitors to the country, or those who would be visitors to the country are not able to come to the country or go to the country for those other countries that are similarly tourism dependent. And so there is immediately a significant hit, a significant impact on the country, its people, because we're talking about an unemployment benefit fund, which was set up, I think it was separated out of the full National Insurance Fund at the beginning of 1997 to stand on its own as its own fund. But it was set up to assist people who ordinarily have jobs, but because of some situation are separated from their employment. And it was set up recognizing that because they're people, they have to eat. They're human beings, people with families to support, people who will need assistance in the unfortunate circumstance that they no longer have employment. Now, I always say that the economy, the macro, is made up of micro. And so the economy is impacted when individuals are impacted. Individuals are impacted when businesses, or in economics they call them firms, are impacted. And with the reduction of business, then there is less room, less scope, sometimes, for businesses to be able to continue the employment. So the the unemployment fund in the national insurance framework was set up to provide that layer of safety, that net, as it were, to allow the fall, to break the fall, is what we say in St. Peter. It allows for the breaking of the fall so that the impact on the worker is not as significant, not as negative as it ordinarily could be. And even with these safety nets, there are still impacts because we recognize, those of us who are members of this Honorable Chamber who have constituencies who represent people, we recognize that there's impact not just financially, but there's impact psychologically on many people. And it was only, I have to admit this, after the lockdown in 2020 at the end of March, that it occurred to me that there are people, because I came across some of these situations, there are people for whom the ability to leave home is a relief because of the situation within the home. And that is not a good thing, but it is a reality that some people live under. And so the impacts on our people have been varied, like I said, financial, economic. There have also been those psychological impacts, the stresses, health impacts of the pandemic. And so having this safety net really provides for our people that ability to cushion the fall that would ordinarily be the case. Now, I'm spending time on this because I really want to say to everybody, to this Honorable Chamber, to the public generally, that it is important to contribute to the National Insurance Scheme. It is important to provide for that rainy day, because rainy days come. As the Honorable Member for St. Michael South Central said, we never, and the planners, those who were around back in the 60s, those who were around in 1997, never envisaged a 2020 or a 2021. But they realize that rainy days do come. And so I really want to impress upon people, upon Barbadians generally, those who are employed, those who are self-employed, put aside something for that rainy day. The National Insurance Scheme has been set up for such a reason, and I want to encourage all of us to recognize that, as the slogan says, it is more than a contribution. It is really, and it has proven during this pandemic period, to be a lifeline for many, many people. The Unemployment Benefit Fund, because of the pandemic, because of the situation of persons losing their employment, exhausted its funding. And so we are here today to recapitalize the fund to some degree, at least to allow it to be able to meet its immediate needs. The expectation is that this amount will allow the unemployment benefit fund based on projections to be able to satisfy any and all claims until the end of the year. Cabinet met and Cabinet agreed that this capitalization would take place. We also understood that, and the National Insurance Department understood that, and their request was not for an immediate full recapitalization, but for a recapitalization to take place over a number of years. And so Cabinet has agreed to that. The legislation makes provision ever since the separation of the unemployment benefit fund from the larger national insurance scheme. The legislation says that if there's any deficiency, then this honorable chamber would, in a debate such as this, make good the situation and allow the fund to be able to do that which it was set up to do. We had in 2020, as we said before, 52,282 claims, roughly 38,000 persons. So far for the year, and this is particularly the case because of the second shutdown we had earlier this year, 23,455 claims. What I will say is that the claims are steadily declining, and the number of claims for July was actually the lowest number in 16 months. And so we are going in the right direction in terms of reduction of number of claims, and that has to do with the fact that the economy is on its way back. Now, on that score, I would want to say to the country and to all of us, we really have a responsibility to do all that we can to ensure that the country does not have to endure any further or any future shutdowns. We have to. And so matters like maintaining our distance, matters like sanitizing, matters like wearing face coverings, face masks, and matters like vaccination need to feature prominently as aspects of the arsenal that will allow us to maintain our current economic activity and to expand that economic activity as we go back to what we may consider a more normal situation. It is critical for the health of Barbadians and those who live here. It is also critical for the society and the challenges that shutdowns and reduction in economic activity bring. It is also essential for the country to be able to continue to manage its fiscal affairs properly. And so I would want to encourage Barbadians to do all that we can. Every time we breach the protocols, we put ourselves at risk, but we also put our country and its people at risk. And so taking a chance is not a sensible thing to do in this kind of a situation. Taking a chance is not appropriate in a pandemic. A pandemic is a global health emergency, and so there are serious health implications. And as we've seen, these health implications impact our economy, they impact our social safety net. Our social safety net is not one that we should scoff at. As I engage with colleagues across the region, many of them look with favor at our social security system. In many cases, there is that desire to emulate the kind of structure and systems that we have in Barbados, and that sometimes we take for granted. And I'm really saying to all of us, to this honorable chamber, Madam Chair, that we have a system that we can be proud of. We have a system that has worked. We have a system that continues to take care of the persons who are vulnerable. The honorable member for St. Michael South Central made a point about misfortune being possible for any of us. And that is an important point that I would want people, including those who have jobs that may be considered more resilient, more permanent, to consider. Most Barbadians are 1 or 2 or 3 paychecks away from poverty. Most of us are 1 or 2 or 3 paychecks away from poverty. And so it is important for us, all of us, to make sure that these systems that have been set up to assist in the resilience of the country, but resilience of people. It is important that these structures and these systems be supported. It is important that they be taken seriously, and therefore it is important that our people continue to contribute to these schemes, these systems, these funds. I also want to make an appeal to employing organizations. The appeal to employing organizations is really an appeal to say to those organizations to recognize that the people who work for you are human beings. They're not just labor. They are people, and people who need to be protected. And so attempting to find ways of moving people from being employed and to refer to them as contractors or subcontractors or self-employed persons is not appropriate. It does not recognize the humanity of your workers. And if you are a decent employing organization, you would want to do the right thing on behalf of the people who work for you. And so what sometimes we see as the practice of attempting to justify moving persons from employment to some other form, casualization, moving to informality, we want to ask persons to desist from that. I say that at the same time as I recognize that there is a move not to informality or not to casualization, but to what is referred to as a gig economy type of work arrangement. And the gig economy is a new, to some degree, way of working. It is a very attractive one, but it is also a way of working that is engaged in by people who do not want to be tied to any particular place of employment or employer for a very long period of time, who want to be able to move around and share skills and earn a living. Those persons also have the opportunity to make sure that they are part of the social security system. So I'm not, by my call, diminishing the fact or the reality of the gig economy. We encourage entrepreneurship. We encourage people to involve themselves in new forms of work, but always remembering that that safety net is important for all of us. Before I conclude my brief remarks, Madam Chair, I just want to say something about the severance situation and I think I should use this opportunity to do that. There are two major groups of persons who have been occupying our attention, that we've been working hard to satisfy their legitimate claims. Their claims are legitimate. There are LIAT workers, former LIAT workers who had contributed to the National Insurance Scheme. And the first set of those workers who had appeared before the Severance Payments Tribunal, that process is all but complete for those persons who appeared before the tribunal. And the payments to those former employees is expected to be made, if not by the end of this week, early next week. And so we're very happy about that. There are a number of persons who fell within the sunset legislation that this Honorable Chamber passed last year. That group of persons expected, correctly so, an expedited process. I'm pleased to share that the arbiters for that expedited process have been appointed. They have been given their instruments, and the information that I have suggests that dates have been set for those hearings, and so we expect that between the end of this month and very early in September, that those matters relating to those persons who are in the expedited process will be satisfied. The workers from Accra, those matters are also being expedited, being addressed, and they will come to a conclusion in the very, very near future. And when it's in the very near future, I'm speaking to by maybe sometime in the month of September. And in all these situations, we are attempting as best we can to maintain the communication with those workers. We understand the pressure, and I use the word understand. Maybe I should not use the word understand, because a person has to have on the shoe really to feel the pinch. But we recognize that those persons must be hurting. And so we are doing all that we can to make sure that the process is not prolonged unnecessarily, that we follow all the laws that we need to, and that all payments are made in an expedited manner. I repeat what the Prime Minister, the Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, has said on a number of occasions. We will not allow our people to fall through the cracks. We've said that is a commitment we have made, and this party in government has always stood by its word. And so we will do good and do right by the people. The final thing I want to say, Madam Chair, is that, and again, I'm picking up on something that the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central said. The National Insurance Scheme, generally speaking, must be seen as both that safety net for the workers of this country, as well as a vehicle, one of the vehicles for the development of this country that will allow those workers and others to enjoy a better quality of life. Significant funds remain in the entire construct managed by the National Insurance Department, and it is important that the funds of the people are put to work on behalf of the people. The people's funds cannot be whimsically used, and under this administration will never be whimsically used. But there has to be a recognition that the goal of all of our efforts, the goal of all of the funds that are deposited, paid in by all of us who pay national insurance, the end result is to ensure that Barbados is in such a position as to be able to provide for persons, whether it is maternity, unemployment, severance, whether it is in catastrophes, whether it is unemployment injury, whether it is pension when one reaches pensionable age. The scheme must be able to provide in those scenarios. And while preparing to support persons in those scenarios, the national insurance scheme must be in a position to make sure that all of the attendant services, whatever is needed for that national development, takes place. And so it is important that we recognize that the fund is the people's fund. It is set up to protect people. It is set up to make sure that this country is one where the people, the workers, are able to enjoy a good standard of living now and also enjoy a decent standard of living when they reach retirement age. And so, Madam Chair, with those words, I support this resolution for the recapitalization of the unemployment fund.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. James South.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I want to start by thanking this government for doing what it is about to do, which is to recapitalize the NIS fund to allow us to create that safety net, as was just shared by the previous speaker, and to allow Barbadians to know that we are seeking to manage their affairs well. This government has chosen to do this work in order to ensure that Barbadians, when they fall on hard times, will have something that can assist them in that time. But this is not the first time that the Barbados Labour Party has done things with the foresight that it normally operates with. I remember when the fund was in trouble and it needed to be recalibrated so that we would not run out because of the changes in the population size. It was not a very popular move. It resulted in people paying a little more into the NIS, but I'm trusting that Barbadians can now see the wisdom with which we have always moved as a government, the Barbados Labour Party government. And so I want to sincerely congratulate our government on this. But what I want to focus on this afternoon is the whole issue of, if we did not have the NIS and the other things that we put in place, how would we have managed COVID? COVID is not something to be trifled with. COVID was not predicted by anyone. No one knows where it's going to go. I heard on the news that there's now a new variant called Gamma. So we had Alpha, Beta, we're now at Delta, and now there's another one called Gamma. And we don't know where it's going to go. But what we do know is that COVID is going to affect our lives. The question that we have as a country, as individuals, as citizens, what are we prepared to do to protect our lives? What are we going to ask of our government to do to protect our lives? Our government has answered the call. We're recapitalizing. But we as citizens also have to answer this call, because I listened with some alarm that in St. Lucia, their daily case yesterday was 121. In Trinidad, it was 81. Jamaica has also been climbing. And this fills me with alarm because I know that it could affect us if we as citizens and as a government don't take the necessary care to protect this island from that virus. And when I look at the impact of lockdown, this is an experience, a first-time experience for us as many people in the world, but certainly for us here in the Caribbean, what lockdown means. Now, in big countries, huge economies, lockdowns mean that their economy will slow down. And many of those countries do not have some of the benefits that we take for granted here in Barbados. Like the things we provide on the NIS, that you can get maternity care, you can get this, you can get that. There are a number of different things that we offer, unemployment, etc. Some places don't offer those types of things that we have enshrined in our NIS. But a lockdown, the COVID lockdown, just simply slows down those economies. But small island states like ours, lockdowns can kill the economy and its people with it. And that is why it's doubly serious for us. We've already pointed out how the slowdown in the developed countries was between 8 and 10%. For small nations like ours, it was in the vicinity of 20%. And this impacted everyone on the ground. So if we had to translate that into COVID parlance, it would mean that small island states like ours have comorbidity issues, that if we get hit with a lockdown, it can mean death. Once you are dependent on tourism, you are going to be at risk of economic death, because tourism is the heart of the economy. Now, the Honourable Member for St. Peter, and I believe the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central, spoke about the number of claims that were made on the NIS. They spoke about the fact that ordinarily, in a normal year, it's 11,000, but under COVID, it was 52,000. Thank God for the NIS that it was there. It was one part of our arsenal to help deal with it. But the NIS could not shield the economy from the lash that it took. Because tourism employs directly and indirectly close to 14,000 people. And if you think about what they spend on a monthly basis, even at a very modest salary, even if you say $2,000, that's over $28 million per month that tourism workers generate. That's close to $336 million in a year. And where does that money go? The money goes into the supermarkets, the boutiques, the hairdressers, the lunchtime vendors, the farmers, the gas stations, and so on and so forth. And because tourism collapsed, that is what caused those 52,000 people to have to run to the NIS to be able to get something to keep food on the table and to keep the shelter above their heads. It wasn't just the tourism workers that had to go, because when that spending stopped, people who were laid off in the boutiques and gas stations and pharmacies and so on, they too had to go. And then you have the businesses, Madam Chair, that service those businesses, stationaries, cleaning places, people who offer different services and products to businesses that they can function. They too suffered, and their workers also joined the line at the NIS to get succor in the time of need. So everybody was impacted. And we did our best. It was not only the NIS, and let me thank the NIS staff. They're accustomed dealing with X number of people per month. But to be faced suddenly with 5 times the number of persons you're accustomed dealing with, it must have put the operations into a tailspin. And therefore, it would have impacted the staff significantly. We did what we could in terms of vouchers, in terms of the household program of offering some households that had no one working $600 to help keep them afloat. But the truth is that that will never be enough What we need in Barbados is to be able to find a way to get our economy back on its feet so that we can earn again. I just want to explain how we could get back up. To get back up and to get all the other businesses up means that tourism has to re-emerge. Now, for that to happen, we would have to position ourselves and our tourism product in such a way that it could get on its feet and be able to restore jobs to people. But here's the problem. Tourism is vulnerable in two major ways. It is vulnerable from without, because events taking place outside of our borders, over which we have no control, can shut tourism down. We discovered that on 9/11. Or it can be damaged from within. That actions we take or fail to take could create a situation domestically, either an increase in the COVID cases or an increase in crime as a result of people not being able to work, and what you would have is a severe heart attack on your tourism product. So it is very important that Barbadians understand this. Now, we do not have control over what is going on outside, because as COVID cases rise, people will start to limit travel, either because of desire. I'm not taking any risks, I'm staying home, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not getting on a plane. The citizen can do that. They can shut down our tourism, a citizen from somewhere else. Or a government could decide there's too much risk and just blank travel. So if we are to be able to find a way to live while all these countries are fluctuating through all these waves and so on, there has to be something that we as Barbadians can do and must do in order that we can restore it. If from within you get the spread of COVID because of variants, and the spread occurs because Barbadians do not take seriously the importance of vaccinations, for example. There's some who don't because they feel I'm young, it ain't gonna do me nothing. Was the big thing? If I take it, you could still get the COVID, so why put myself to the trouble of taking it? There are people who are that way. There's some who are terrified. They feel that something is in the vaccine and it will kill them, and therefore they do not wish to take it. And then some have other philosophical reasons why they do not take it. But the point is, all of this puts us at risk of spread. And if we were to have another lockdown, I don't know how the NIS would be able to withstand several onslaughts of lockdowns. So this is why it is important that as Barbadians, we take seriously what we have to do in order to ensure that we keep our country safe. And that means, as was shared by previous speakers, protocols, masks, sanitizing, distancing, and not taking risks, especially with people that you know, because they tend to spend a lot of time in your presence. So the restoration of our tourism now, therefore, means, yes, outside will fluctuate, but if we can keep Barbados steady, if we can keep the cases down, if we can build the notion or the image or the brand that Barbados is safe, for those who want to run away from their at-risk homes, wherever they are across the globe, to come here, not just for a holiday, but to come to be part of the long-term program that we have, where the welcome stamp that will allow you to stay here for a year. If we are able to consistently send the message, despite thick and thin, despite the variations going on outside, that Barbados is always able to keep this virus in check, then, Madam Chair, our tourism could rebound, and Barbadians can work, and we can feed our children, and we can pay our bills. This is going to be important. though the NIS and the vouchers helped us during that period, and I want to sincerely thank again the charities that worked to do hampers, the charities that gave vouchers, government for making monies available. They can only help in a pinch. They were not able to meet all of the needs. While it may have allowed you to put food on the table, it might not have been able to stretch to rent. It might not have been able to stretch to the light bill or the water bill. And so families continued to have pressure. Even though they were being given assistance, they were still under pressure. And many families are not able to sustain that pressure for several years. It is hard. It is hard. And therefore, if we want to seriously respond and do all that is necessary to relieve our own situation, to act in our own interests, Barbadians have to be alerted that the only way to get back to work is to use the protocols. The only way to get more income to pay those bills, it means the protocols. If our children are to go back to school and not find themselves losing a second year of their education, it is the protocols that we have to use. If our businesses are going to get back strength, if we're going to be able to welcome our customers again, it is the protocols that is going to make the difference. Because as long as we can control the spread within our borders, it means that people outside will take the chance to come to Barbados, and that will help us to put tourism back on the map. And that will cause our secondary layer of general services that service the population and service the industry, all of them will be able to be revived and employment can go back on. So I want to say to citizens, I have so many people asking for a job, and it's hard. It is hard on them. It is hard to hear that they have children and they're having a struggle keeping food on the table. But I know there's one thing that all of them can do right now. Our protocols, and the other thing they can do is vaccinate. If we are going to create that safe tourism, then we have to act as partners together. Government has its role that it must play, and it must play it well, and it must play it consistently. To determine what are the protocols for people entering our country, what are the conditions for quarantining, how will they engage our space, and every single member, whether it's of immigration, customs, health, hotels, wherever, they must play their part in ensuring that they are consistent about the application of those protocols to make sure that they keep us as safe as they can. But that is not enough. It can only keep it under control. Citizens, we have to play our part working together with government by making sure that any entrance of a Delta variant or whatever variant is coming does not spread into our communities by what they do every single day. So every tourism worker has to be on top of their protocols. They must not forget, because if the variant enters through them, it is going to make its way all the way through to every village and town in this country. I know. I used to provide management consulting services in the tourism industry, and I used to do training. And I could tell you that every year when you had visitors coming in on those planes with whatever variant of flu they had that year, they would go to the hotels. The hotel staff would pick it up. The hotel staff will take it to their homes. Their children will go to school, and other household members will go to other operations and spread it in those scenes. And the end result was that that flu would run right through the country. COVID can do that too if we do not obey the protocols. So I want to end by saying to Barbadians, don't let us play with our future. If we need our jobs, if our loved ones need jobs, if our loved ones are vulnerable, let us put ourselves back in control of our destiny through protocols and vaccination. And that way, we will create a safe Barbados so that it's safe for our people and it's safe for our visitors. And that way, we will restart our engine to generate prosperity for Barbados and to build our future. I'm obliged to you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Honorable Leader of the Office. Honorable Leader of the Opposition, or okay.
Thank you, ma'am. Just to make a brief contribution to the discussion, debate on the supplementary request before us. I do thank the government for allowing me at least a sight of the supplementary request. Just as we started debate today, it is not a lot of money, just a small amount of $103 million. So it is all right if I get it just as we start the discussion. And I thank the government for allowing me sight of the supplementary request. Now, Madam Chair, the integrity of the National Insurance Scheme in Barbados should never be left to doubt or fall subject to question. In recent times, and when I say recent times, I mean over the last 12 years or so, from time to time questions have been raised as to the integrity and the viability of the funds under the broad rubric of the National Insurance Scheme, and that should never be something that falls to doubt. This is not a fund derived from revenues earned through normal tax initiatives. In a sense, this is a unique mechanism in that we're dealing with funds not normally raised in those kind of ways, but with people's savings. And therefore, it should never fall subject to question, where the extent to which that results is that people have serious doubts about its viability or about their future, whether that future be fairly immediate, should something ill befall them, or distant with respect to pensions and stuff like that. So I would want, obviously, to support the attempt to recapitalize the unemployment fund here, one of the major funds handled by the National Insurance, Barbados National Insurance Scheme. But as has been acknowledged, it is an attempt to partially recapitalize the fund. Now, this administration, when in opposition, spoke with some frequency with reference to the urgency attaching to a matter like recapitalizing the funds of the National Insurance Scheme. I want to be clear. I'm happy that we are recapitalizing the unemployment fund to the extent as is indicated in the supplementary request. But if you speak when you're in opposition to the urgency attaching to ensuring that the fund is always properly capitalized, then we have to ask you to exercise the same sense of urgency when it falls your responsibility so to do, to make sure that there is as swift as possible a recapitalization of the fund. This is partial. What therefore is the schedule going forward for the fuller or fullest possible recapitalization of the fund. Now, this administration also, when in opposition, loudly gave commitment to redress the matter of debt reduction in Barbados, to undertake a program of debt redress, but to do so without having to make recourse to debt default or haircuts. The reality is, when faced with the responsibility after coming to government, whatever the circumstances, recourse was immediately made to haircuts and defaults in order to redress the situation with respect to debt in Barbados. And the National Insurance Scheme was one of those funds in Barbados that fell victim to this. The National Insurance Scheme, together with the Central Bank in Barbados. So I hear you say, in one instance, debt must be addressed, and urgently so, but without reference to haircuts or defaults. When faced with the responsibility, immediate action is to, by default and by haircuts, inflict some fairly devastating blows on major funds in Barbados, both at the Central Bank and at the National Insurance Scheme. These are realities. It falls government's obligation and duty to explain why they undertake the courses of action that they do, having taken, prior to coming to office, positions which were contrary to those actions. I want to suggest, as I have before, repeat again, therefore, governance reform is one of the things which is necessary, and I don't think this government has spoken loudly, clearly, or in any sustained fashion with respect to governance reforms around the operations of funds under the NIS or even at the Central Bank of Barbados. We did bring a measure here to this Parliament some months back that addressed certain things at the Central Bank, but I don't think we've gone far enough. And governance reform is something that is widely needed in Barbados on several fronts, but certainly when it comes to the operations and the management of major funds, such as those under the rubric of the NIS and those managed by the Central Bank of Barbados, we have to be careful that we always have in place the kind of governance structures and mechanisms that nullify or negate, counter any attempts to, on the part of the political agenda, to influence decision-making by the principals at the Central Bank or the principals in management of the national insurance funds in Barbados. I think these things are very important. We talk a lot about the lack of proper audited reports from several state-related entities. And again, these two are principal above state-related entities, Central Bank of Barbados, National Insurance Scheme. But I'm calling, Madam Chair, for urgency to be attached to ensuring that the National Insurance Scheme provides proper and prompt audited reports of the undertakings over there. This is one of the things that will help to sustain people's confidence in the integrity, people's confidence in the future viability of the scheme and of the funds managed by these schemes. Now, I think it was Honourable Member St. Peter made a reference to matters relative to severance payments, and I would add to that pensions. And I was glad that he did, because I made a note here that I wanted to raise it. There has been some movement, as far as I understand, after some sustained agitation, especially on the part of hotel workers. And in those cases, I think many have begun to receive severance payments owed to them. I think the LEAT issue, or the LEAT workers issue, is still very much in question. I still get calls from both hotel workers and people who have an association with the LEAT operations in the past, who have been impacted by the developments around that airline with respect to payments owed to them. We do know that some partial measures have been undertaken with respect to some of those who have been affected, but there's still others. I'm heartened to hear that the work is ongoing and that soon, rather than later, there will be fuller and perhaps final redress of some of the situations with respect to severance and pensions, especially with respect to those who paid international insurance in Barbados. I think pilots who had not necessarily paid into the national insurance scheme in Barbados, because the arrangements allowed them to pay in Antigua, were taken care of partially, but there were others who were left not fully satisfied with what was happening with respect to their lot. So I'm happy to hear that is ongoing. There are some workers, I raised the issue here in Parliament too long ago with respect to workers associated with Caves, what is now Caves of Barbados, change over from the original ownership, the original management relationship, workers who formerly had an arrangement under the purview of the National Conservation Commission. And my information is that there's still people whose lot has not been fully seen to subsequent to the changeover to Caves. I raised it here. I think the Honourable Member for St. James Central gave the assurance to the Parliament that persons had been fully paid. My information is that there's still several people who have outstanding amounts of pension owed to them, people who have pension arrangements not fully and finally formalized, and therefore do not know what is going to befall them and their future with respect to that. And I therefore urge for a statement that would give some clarity to this matter. Now, there is some pressure being brought to bear, as I understand it, upon the government by one of the international financial sources or entities to make some adjustments to pension arrangements in Barbados. There's a little bit of disquiet with respect to that. The subject has lost some of the spotlight, I guess, with all that is happening around us. And I would really urge, encourage, wish, invite somebody on the part of government to speak, if they are in a position so to do, as to what is likely to happen with respect to pension arrangements for workers in Barbados, and particularly so public servants who serve and work in the cause of this country. What does that portend for them, those who will be entering the workforce? What does that portend for them? And when are we likely to know definitively where we are going? These things are important. I don't want to take a lot of time. I support the partial recapitalization. I urge for greater sense of urgency with respect to fuller capitalization, some perhaps declaration of what the schedule is with respect to that, and that we seek those who form government to establish in the minds of people a strong confidence with respect to how these institutions function, and that the viability attaching to their operations will be such that their futures are not, people's futures are not imperiled. I also again urge for a serious look at governance reforms with respect to how these entities are managed, with respect to individuals who are still suffering, having been severed, lost their jobs, or retired, the issue of severance and pension, I mentioned just a few, and certainly beyond that, the whole issue of pension arrangements in Barbados going forward, especially for those who will be coming into the workforce at some soon date. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to all the members who spoke in support of this recapitalization of the unemployment benefit account. I want to take a couple minutes to give some further context in light of the discussion. First, let me say that the agreement by Cabinet, understanding that were we in a perfect world, we would recapitalize all at once. I am happy to report this afternoon that the Governor of the Central Bank has just advised me that we are in receipt of what we call the IMF Special Drawing Rights, SDRs, in the amount of Barbados $261.58 million. Now, before the Honorable Leader of the Opposition leans forward with too much interest to accuse us of going further into debt, it is not a loan. It is not a loan. Special drawing rights are what are termed as unconditional liquidity. So it gives us a little bit more elbow room and further space to meet some of the demands of the time that we are in. But I will say that Cabinet agreed to recapitalization over a 3-year period subject to these cash flow issues. So that in the first instance, the proposal is for recapitalization, the amount of $60 million by March of next year, and this $50 million goes to that target. Within a year from there of another $60 million, and within a year from there of $23 million. Now, again, 2020 and 2021 have shown us that the best laid plans are often subject to the will of those whom we hear and feel but cannot see. And for different groups of us, those people are called in different ways, or those forces are referenced in different ways. But we have to be practical. And this recapitalization, in concert with the contributions that will continue to come, as the Honourable Member for St. Peter indicated, give us a certain certainty that we can cover the immediately forecasted claims that will need to be paid, given the trend that we're seeing, and that we will continue over the following 2 years to complete the recapitalization. So, you know, Madam Chair, the NIS department manages 6 funds. On the question of the audit, we know that the department has had to resubmit for past years more complete information, and I am advised that those submissions are taking place across 4 of the 6 funds, and that the 2020 audit for 2 of those 6 funds is already underway. I will close by saying that these efforts are in the context of several efforts that government must undertake, and we will come in the following heads to talk about some of those. That we, earlier this year, a few weeks ago, were able to submit, or what we call nationally determined contributions, under the framework that manages the issues of climate change and the climate crisis for the Paris Agreement. And that's important because Barbados submitted a target of 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions, even though we're not the main contributors. But we submitted that, one of the most ambitious targets in the world, even as we were dealing with the volcanic ashfall in April, the freak storm that occurred, I believe, in June, and the passing of Hurricane Elsa. I made these points at an international meeting of ministers discussing climate matters in London a few weeks ago, and I made this point to show that while there are several competing draws on government resources, and I don't just mean cash, I don't just mean cash resources, I don't just mean financial resources, while there are several competing draws on government resources, we are not shrinking from the responsibility that we have to people. And when we have to say, we can't do all now, we can make sure that you're good, we can make sure that you're covered for now. My mother used to say, when I ask about the future, or I ask about what I might get to eat tomorrow, she used to say, eat what in front of you first. And it is simply to say that we have to make sure that we cover everyone for today. Because it is a balancing act. And that is why all of us that constitute the government of Barbados, and all of us in the private sector of Barbados, and all of us in the NGOs and the third sector, all Barbadians have to be able to carry out that balancing act together, because we are not fooling you. It is a question of how and when and where these resources are coming. And we say all the time, it's not a liquidity issue. It is that we have to simultaneously manage our domestic interests and take care first and foremost of our people, and also make sure that we are and are seen to be doing the right things with respect to governance. We brought a revised Central Bank Act here that addressed issues of governance concerning that institution and the resources managed by that institution, and the limits that govern what that institution can do, what this government can do with respect to being able to draw on the resources of the central bank. Similarly, the National Insurance Department is working on its own governance arrangements. We're doing the work. We will never say that we can do all at once, and we can never say that we can deliver everything at once. But it is our duty to make sure that we are taking care of all Barbadians step by step, bringing everyone along. And with those words, Madam Chair, I move that Head 34 in the amount of $50 million stand part.
That Head 34 in the amount of $50 million stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 86, Ministry of Health and Wellness, in the amount of $1,077,992.
Honorable member for St. Michael South Central.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This sum is required by the Ministry of Health and Wellness to facilitate the implementation of the COVID-19 tracking and monitoring system, which includes the further development of what we have all come to know as the BIM Safe app and the SHAPE application. Now, we are all aware that the Ministry of Health and Wellness must be given the resources to do what it needs to do in order to protect us. But even so, this morning, the Queen Elizabeth Hospital shared with the public the acquisition of 2 ambulances, 2 new ambulance vehicles. And as we speak, an expanded, improved accident and emergency department is operational. It goes to, I shared, remember for Christchurch West, shared some personal stories this morning. I'm going to share a small one, no names though, except perhaps the name of my dog. I posted a little video of one of my dogs, a training video. And in the video, I was training her with hand signals. The reason this is, Madam Chair, I see you waiting for the punchline. The reason this is important with those of us who have animals, especially protection animals, is that sometimes the animal is far away from you, sometimes the atmosphere is noisy, and if you have to ask the animal to do something and to respond, sometimes a hand signal comes in handy because the animal can look at you and know what to do without you having to say anything. Why am I going on and on about Zook, my 1.5-year-old Corso? Because often you can get great impact without having to say a word. And, you know, the Ministry of Health and Wellness has been, outstanding, exemplary in terms of the COVID response. But behind and beneath and alongside that, they have also been delivering on the basic healthcare needs of Barbadians. There are many things that go into this COVID response. And you know, the reason that I happen to be introducing this head, and I don't mind saying, even though one is advised one should not, is that right now the Minister of Health and Wellness, the honorable member for the city of Bridgetown, has just been there to receive the final batch of COVAX facility vaccines, AstraZeneca vaccines. Because there's so much work to do in this response. And, you know, sometimes we don't see the little fine things, all of the conversations that have to take place with respect to procurement, with respect to capital works and construction, with respect to making sure that all of these facilities are properly staffed with doctors and nurses and orderlies and administrative staff, and it is a huge operation. And part of this operation is data. And Madam Chair, you will perhaps know this more than any of us in here. It is so important to know what is going on with your population when it comes to health. The first thing that you do, Madam Chair, when you see a patient is take a history, right? You have to know the baseline, you have to know exactly what is happening and where this person is coming from that presents to you. Some friends of mine have just came to visit, Barbadians who live overseas and are here. And when they came in, whenever anybody comes, anybody at all, I ask, how did it go at the airport? What was your experience? What was your experience with respect to testing, with respect to getting through? How did it go? And they said it was unlike anything we've ever seen anywhere else that we've gone. And we know that sometimes there are things that happen, but in general, this was their experience. And they said, and what was amazing to us was the use of these apps to be able to take our information and to be able to deliver results to us and to be able to track us. And you know, they said we had just come from somewhere else and nobody asked us anything. Mm-hmm. And we were so happy to be asked questions. We were so happy to show our proof of vaccination. We were so happy to tell the authorities everything, because we want that if we need to be contacted, that we can be. We want that if we happen to have been sitting next to somebody who turned out to be positive, that we know right away. We want to be part of a robust healthcare response. And so this BIMSafe app and this SHAPE application, I believe, were developed right here by Barbadians. And it is part of the contact tracing. I will tell you that when Barbados started contact tracing, very few other jurisdictions were doing it. People were calling us and saying, but how you found all these people that were related to this particular case? And we were able to contain the spread because of the tremendous work with contact tracing. And those officials, you know, I'm often in meetings with officials of the health sector. I say the health sector because it's not just public sector. It's also private sector. Everybody is coming together in the sector to be able to mount this kind of response. And when I consider the commitment and the willingness to be up at any hour of the morning, but I suppose, Madam Chair, that's the nature of the profession, to be up at any hour of the morning, to stay till any time of night, to sit down and go through details. And when I look at the rigor of the contact tracing, and when I hear the detail that is given in reporting on cases and saying, without breaching anybody's confidentiality, we have been able to confirm that this number of cases is related to this case, that kind of rigor, I really have to publicly applaud and congratulate the officials in the health sector, in the Ministry of Health and Wellness, in the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, in the polyclinics, and all who are fighting for this cause. It is difficult work, and it is often thankless work. But these types of technologies have allowed Barbados to stand out in terms of its COVID response and in terms of keeping people well and healthy. I've noticed from the reports that the uptake of the Pfizer vaccine so far has been overwhelming. And I'm happy to see that. I'm happy to know that people, having joined the conversation about COVID vaccines, are taking their choice to become vaccinated, to protect themselves, to protect their families and their communities. And I hope that it continues. And so with those words, Madam Chair, I move that head 86 in the amount of $1,077,992 stand part.
Question is that head 86 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 92, Ministry of Energy, Small Business and Entrepreneurship, in the amount of $2,040,000.
Honorable member for St. James Central.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, this is a very simple exercise where we seek the support of the House in order to, as the accounting code makes clear, provision $2 million towards fund investments, which I will elaborate on in due course, and equally the sum of $40,000 towards furniture and fittings. Ma'am, I suppose I should begin by pointing out that this all forms part of the Sustainable Energy Investment Program, which has come to be known as Smart Fund 2. And for the benefit of those within earshot, there are two Smart Fund programs. The first was Smart Fund Energy 1, and that was implemented in the year 2011, and I believe ran until sometime around June of 2017. And now we're at Smart Fund 2, which really is encompassing more or less a continuation of the activities of Smart Fund 1, but against the lessons learned from that Smart Fund 1 experience. The program's objectives, ma'am, are very simple. They're twofold in nature. First of all, to reduce the dependency by Barbados and the Barbados community on fossil fuels. And secondly, ma'am, the increase in energy efficient technology across this country. It is important to remember, ma'am, that the fund is very practical in its approach. It is really directed towards assisting businesses in this Smart Fund 2 There will be tremendous effort towards targeting businesses, again, targeting public sector entities, and even, ma'am, assisting private homeowners in some respects. I should say as well that the component parts of the fund touch and concern some issues, for example, inefficient lighting. It may surprise you, ma'am, to know that there are parts of the world, in fact, parts of the Caribbean, certainly not this house, where members of those houses of assembly have been heard to say that the parliament of that particular country does not deal with matters that contact the ordinary man. And they lay claim in some instances, obviously opposition spokesmen and women, lay claim that the parliament of those particular countries is just really a talk shop and does not collide with the day-to-day sensitivities of the average person. Perish the thought that that day would ever dawn in this country, ma'am. But the fact of the matter is that, as you will well recall, this parliament was treated to a control of inefficient lighting bill only a little while ago, which falls very squarely into this whole exercise that we're talking about, where we are trying to make sure that energy efficient technologies are brought to the people of Barbados. Albeit that that particular piece of legislation was more related to concerns that arose under Smart Energy 1, it is part and parcel of the general thinking that drives us in Smart Fund 2. Now, ma'am, what are the programmatic structures? The program structures are 3 component parts. The first, ma'am, with respect to Smart Fund 2, is that there is going to be financial instruments, or there are going to be rather financial instruments aimed at providing money for the design and the development of renewable energy projects and energy efficiency projects as well. And this component is going to be implemented by the Enterprise Growth Fund as the fund manager. There is already an agreement in place between the Enterprise Growth Fund and Fund Access for Fund Access to work in partnership with Enterprise Growth Fund so as to make sure that these deliverables can be specifically targeted. Bear in mind that Enterprise Growth Fund does not naturally treat micro and small enterprises as its main client, but Fund Access does so. And so therefore, that is the reason for having that type of partnership arrangement put in place. But the intention is for that fund being managed by Enterprise Growth Fund Limited in collaboration with Fund Access to be structured in such a way as to make sure that small and micro businesses be the ultimate beneficiaries of the financing that we're talking about. The component 1 is broken into 3 sub-component parts. Subcomponent 1 is the pre-investment studies for small micro enterprises and grants to finance pre-investment studies and pilots in energy efficiency exercises and renewable energy efforts. So that if, for example, you have a small business out there and you're interested in finding ways to make it green and energy efficient, then it will involve some element of audits. It will involve, no doubt, some element of study as to what best you should do, what menu of options you may be able to be assisted in coming up with. And that is when you come into Fund Access and sit with the folks in Fund Access with a view to outlining what it is you're hoping to achieve, and then get the benefit of the financial assistance so as to be part of the exercise. Similarly, subcomponent 1-2 is the implementation stage of renewable energy and energy efficient projects. And that speaks, ma'am, to financing loans. And yet again, if you're interested as a small business operator in being able to retrofit that business that you have, or to outfit the business that you have in such a way as to be using more renewable energy, or energy efficient technologies, then, ma'am, again, fund access is the window where you go to in order to achieve that kind of financing. And it covers the gamut of possible options. No micro or small or medium enterprise is being overlooked in this regard. So that, for example, because of the importance of the Barbados economy, the importance of tourism to the Barbados economy, you can see, for example, that small hotels might be interested in using a fund of this nature in order to retrofit their energy in terms of the rooms and common areas and so on, so that they have more efficient energy. Or alternatively, they may wish to put in solar photovoltaic so that they drive the product and the campus of the hotel, so to speak, by way of renewable energy technology. And equally, using that hotel as one side of the possible range and coming right back down to the smaller persons or the smallest of persons who may have, for example, a cart. And that cart he wishes to operate by day and by night, as he should be encouraged to, because there is no reason why, if you are doing whatever you have in your cart, selling whatever you have, that you can't have a photovoltaic panel on it so that you're generating light and you're able to continue to function even if the nighttime has fallen. There's no reason why you got to pack up and go home. And effectively, pardon? Yeah, well, precisely, to continue to generate electricity. So that these are the financial interventions that we are seeking to do in order to make sure, ma'am, to use the language that I actually heard reported speech had come from somewhere in the Caribbean, I'm not sure where, to make the Parliament more relevant to the people, so as to make sure that the people benefit from these types of interventions. And of course, ma'am, to make sure that we never are entreated to that type of language here in Barbados. There's a third subcomponent, ma'am, and that third subcomponent is with respect to air conditioning, trading, and rebate facility. And this one also touches homeowners as well. And the intention is to have a 50% rebate for businesses, for householders, and of course, ma'am, for those people in, well, private business, householders, and even in the government sector, where you would wish to trade in inefficient air conditioning technologies for those that are more efficient energy-wise, and therefore you get a 50% rebate on that when once that facility is up and running. Ma'am, that's component one and the three subcomponents that go with it. In component two, the intention is to facilitate government in promoting smart grids and energy storage, and to expand renewable energy penetration and renewable energy benefits across the society. And in this component, we will see 100 public buildings being retrofitted with renewable energy and energy efficient technology. I'm pleased to say, ma'am, that Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute has already been declared and opened as a champion building with a complete retrofit of its energy facility. The Honorable Leader of the House and myself had the opportunity to participate in that launch of the Samuel Jackman Prescott Institute only a couple of months ago. Similarly, ma'am, with respect to the idea of developing smart grids, what effectively we are driving at, ma'am, is the bidirectional energy flows, so that you have roof-mounted solar, and you just picture, ma'am, if you will, a community built out with every house, or maybe it might be an industrial park, every place of business with roof-mounted solar. You have charging ports outside of the place so that the vehicles coming and going are being charged by this renewable energy methodology. Equally, you have storage, battery storage, facilities so that you are storing the energy that you create during the day and then allowing it to be put back into the grid at night. And effectively, ma'am, you have an area sub-network being created, which is a sort of a microgrid, looking after itself, balancing itself out, almost in a state, ma'am, independent of the national grid that we are talking about, but equally being able to plug into the national grid to supply the excess energy that it produces. And that is where we are trying to drive the communities in Barbados and the businesses and business clusters in Barbados in individual groupings. The total cost of the program, ma'am, in Barbados currency would be supported by the Inter-American Development Bank in the sum of 60 million Barbados dollars, and in the sum of 30 million Barbados dollars by way of support from the European Union. The project execution unit in the Ministry of Energy has recognized that $2 million was omitted from the estimates at the time when we did the estimates in March in order to facilitate the recapitalization of the Smart Energy Fund 2. And this $2 million that you see here for fund investment is specifically under account code 721, is intended for that recapitalization effort. Permission has been sought from the Ministry of from the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs and Investment for us through the Central Bank of Barbados to go this route and to validate the advance by way of this supplementary. And so therefore, ma'am, I am asking the House's permission and support in the advance of this particular objective.
You can move
I'd
the
like
head,
to
please.
Move that head 92 stand part.
Question is that head 92 stand part. All honorable members in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. Methinks the ayes have it.
Head 93, Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, in the amount of $50,415,200.
Honorable member for Christchurch West.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. This sum is primarily due to the response of the government of Barbados to both the freak storm and Hurricane Elsa. And you would know that we had, also in your constituency actually, Madam Chair, significant damage, lots of roof damage, and houses were damaged in both of those systems. And I want to use the opportunity to be able to update the Parliament and by extension the people of Barbados as to where we are with respect to the response. Just give me a minute. Let me get to it here now. So we've been working quite extensively, going around and checking, doing all the assessments. And what has happened is we had 2,106 incident reports that were reported by Disaster Emergency Management as it relates to houses. This is separate, of course, from palings and trees down and so on. Their total amount of reports was totaling almost 3,000. But we picked out just the ones that related to housing, and it came to 2,106 reports. So after that, we put together a committee of people whose responsibility it was to then go and assess all of these. And they went through parish by parish and location by location to be able to assess those. So far, they've completed St. Peter, St. Andrew, St. James, St. John, St. George, and Christchurch. And we still have some to do in St. Lucie, St. Joseph, St. Thomas, St. Michael, and St. Philip. However, so far we've completed 90% of the technical assessments for all of the reports. And these are essentially done so that we can see which houses are total rebuilds, which houses are repairs. And what we found based on that initial assessment, is that 25% of all reports happen to be rebuilds, new houses, whereas the remaining 75% are repairs. So of the 90%, which is 1,890, we found so far, up to present, 466 houses. 466 houses have to be totally rebuilt from that system.